Thank you. You can be seated.
Yes, I can handle it.
We're back on the record. In 14 Sierra 1432, Mr. Jones does appear in custody. He's represented by Ms. Smith and Mr. Colvin. Mr. Rubenstein and Mr. Wade are both here for the people. We're outside the presence of our jury. Anything for the record before I invite our jury back in? Mr. Rubenstein?
No, sir.
Mr. Colvin?
I have nothing for the record. Can I have one
All right.
second before you call them, though?
Yes, sir. Thanks.
Sorry.
No worries.
I'm ready. Sorry, Judge.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and call for a jury then. Hi, Joanne, we're ready for our jury. Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. For the record, our jury has now joined us back in the court. Welcome back, everybody. And if I can invite Mr. Lucas to retake the stand for us, please. You're still under oath, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Mr. Colvin, you can continue with your cross-examination whenever you're ready.
Afternoon.
Oh,
So we had, where we left off is we were going to start talking about splash patterns. You need to explain to us what a splash pattern was. You with me?
yes, I am.
Okay. So based upon the damage from the fire, in other words, the pattern on the door, what was burned up front, what wasn't burned in the back, that's how we're making the determination. The fire is in the driver's seat, floorboard of the car area on the driver's side.
That's where we made the majority of our opinion was derived from that, yes.
Okay. And if an accelerant was used to start this fire, you might see a splash pattern, but you also might not. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
And specifically in this particular case, hypothetically, fire could have been started by splashing gasoline on that seat and on the floorboard, right?
It very well could have, yes.
That would be absolutely consistent with the damage to the vehicle you saw. Would you agree?
I would agree.
And the absence of a splash pattern would not be surprising because the intensity of the fire burned up anything that you could have seen a splash pattern on, right?
As far as a splash pattern, yes, it would have probably been obscured by the amount of damage.
Okay. The fire was not, let me try that one more time. There's nothing from the damage to the vehicle that tells you the fire was started on the seat only. Is that fair?
Yes, it was in that area, but it could have been the seat, the floorboard, other parts, but yes.
And if somebody's pouring gasoline in a vehicle, presumably, would you agree with me, it's not going to be in just, a tiny little spot, right?
It all depends on the individual and the amount used.
Okay. That's a good point. The variables on that could be infinite. Really no way to know that, right?
No, not really.
But certainly it's fair to say, if you want to start a fire, you're going to put more gasoline rather than less, right?
Possibly, yes.
Okay? I mean, the more accelerant you use, the more fire there's going to be off of it. Would you agree?
Oftentimes that's the case, yes.
Okay. And when we're burning gasoline, we're not actually burning the liquid, we're burning the vapors that are coming off of the liquid. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And so the vapors ignite, well, let me try this a different way. If you have a real small concentrated amount of liquid, then the vapors are only coming off of that small concentrated area.
It would depend on the temp, it's all a product of temperature.
Okay?
The warmer it is, the more it will vaporize, and the larger the vapor amount will be for acceleration.
Okay. But once the gasoline's ignited, temperature's going to go up real quick. I mean, that stands to reason.
Yes,
Okay. So if we have a small puddle, little small puddle of gasoline on the car seat, that's not going to go up as fast as if you pour the gasoline on the floorboard, on the seat itself, on the seat back, right?
correct. It wouldn't cover as much area.
Okay. And the area of gasoline coverage means that you're getting more places where vapor can come off of the gasoline, right?
Correct.
More vapor is more stuff that actually burns, right?
Theoretically, yes, yes.
Theoretically and in normal practice,
In normal cases, that would be in fact true.
absent some unusual things that frankly you see no indication of here. Fair to say?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Can I approach the witness, Judge?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to show you two pictures which I labeled O and P, as in Peter. I've previously shown these to the prosecution, Judge.
Thank you.
Okay, do you recognize those, sir?
Yeah, it appears to be the car in question.
Okay. Now, when you did the work on this car, you were actually out at, the first time when you did it, you were out at Walker SMS, right?
Correct.
And so that was the location of where the car was at Walker SMS. That's not when it got moved to the sheriff's department, right?
Yes, this appears to be at the original scene, yes.
Okay. And a bunch of photographs were taken, correct?
Yes, the more the better.
And you've seen them before, right?
Correct.
Okay. Is that a fair and accurate representation of some of, obviously there's a lot more photographs out there, right? Is that a fair and accurate representation of the scene in some of the photographs?
It appears to be, yes.
Okay. Judge, at this time, we'd offer O and P indefinite.
Any objection to defendants O and P, Mr. Rubenstein?
No, Your Honor.
Defendants O and P are both admitted. Yes, sir.
Ms. Smith, could you publish a photograph?
Yes.
Which one I labeled it? Permission to publish, Judge, I'm sorry.
Any objection? O and P, is that what you'd like to publish?
I'm going to publish one or the other. We need to see the photograph to know how I labeled it.
All right, no objection.
No objection.
All right, thank you, that's fine. You can proceed.
It's going to take us a second to get this up there. For our record, what I am publishing is P as in Peter.
Thank you.
Can I approach the screen?
Yes, that's fine, thank you.
Now, this is obviously, the side closest to you is obviously the driver's side, right?
It appears to be the passenger side to me.
Forgot myself. Passenger side, right?
It looks to be correct, yes.
I wouldn't have said obviously, I wouldn't have confused both.
Yeah.
Down here on the ground, right there, it's like, I don't know, pretty much straight down from where the door handle would be, I guess, on that door. See that there?
Yes, I do.
What is that?
It appears to be a portion of the door handle, the exterior.
Okay. And on the other side of the car, I'm going to show you Defendant's Exhibit O. See that right there?
Yes, I do.
That also appears to be the door handle, would you agree?
It appears to be, yes.
And that's on the other side of the car, right?
Correct.
Now, this picture shows pretty good that there's a hole in the door where the door handle would be. You see that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. The fact that the door handles are on the ground from the car, that's not surprising to you as a fire investigator, right?
No, not totally.
Because door handles are held to the car via plastic and that kind of stuff, right?
That's correct.
And that stuff melts
It does.
and it falls off cars that are on fire, right?
It can, yes.
Okay. So, my question for you is, well, let's back up 1 second before I go to that. Now, when you're involved in your arson investigation down at the scene, you talked about how you're collecting evidence, right? You showed us the cans and stuff, right?
That's correct.
But specifically, your investigation is seizing, identifying, and seizing evidence within the car, right?
Within and around the exterior as well.
Okay. Was it your responsibility to collect the evidence outside of the vehicle, or was it in fact the responsibility of the CBI agents to do that?
It would be a cooperative effort.
Okay. Did you ever identify the door handles as something that were present at the time you were doing your investigation?
Did I identify them?
Did you identify them as, oh, there's a door handle on the ground there?
I'm sure we observed them, yes.
Okay. Did you seize them?
Yes, I believe I did, but I can't recall for sure. It's been too long.
Okay. If you seized them, what would you have done with them?
Depending on the circumstances, they may be submitted into evidence, they may not, depending on the relevancy to the fire itself.
So you think that you got these door handles and you put them in evidence?
Do I think we needed to?
Did you? Do you
Did we?
think you did that?
I don't remember if they were submitted into evidence or not. I can't remember.
Okay. Is there a reason you think that the door handles wouldn't potentially have evidentiary value?
I can think of no reason why they wouldn't, no. No.
And wasn't CBI out there collecting evidence from the outside of the car?
They were there as well, yes.
Okay. Your investigative report was, your arson investigation report was written after you conducted your investigation, right?
Correct.
Okay. And do you remember the date you completed that?
Say again, I'm sorry?
Do you remember the date you completed that?
I do not.
But it was close in time to when you conducted the investigation, fair enough?
Yes.
So it would have been completed sometime in 2007, fair?
Oh, yeah, it was done shortly thereafter.
Okay. In your investigation report, you said that CBI conducted an initial investigation of the vehicle and collected any obvious evidence and fingerprints. Do you recall that?
I do recall them being there and collecting samples. That's
Okay.
correct.
And it's after they collect the obvious evidence, that's when you do your investigation inside the vehicle, right?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
Okay. So when you're going inside the vehicle, presumably these handles are gone, wouldn't you think?
It would depend if they were picked up by one of the other investigators
Okay.
from CBI.
Now, as part of your arson investigation into this case, you have to obtain any documentation that's relevant to the fire. Would you agree?
Yes,
And one of the things necessarily you determine is when the fire is called in and when the fire responders get to the scene, right?
yes, that's critical information to have.
Okay. And in fact, you determined based upon fire department records that this fire was called in at what time? Do you recall?
I do not.
Would your refresh and Would your recollection be refreshed by looking at your arson investigation report?
The time should be all, dispatch time should be all present, yes.
Okay? Would you mind do you have your report?
I do not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Come down to a call.
Yeah, dispatch handles that, yes.
Okay. And you obtained this documentation included in your arson investigation report, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What time was the call made? When was the first 911 call?
Time of call here is 21:58.
Okay. And that's in military time?
Correct.
So what time would that be for regular folks?
9:58, I believe.
Okay. 9:58 and how many seconds?
7.
Okay. 9:58:07?
Correct.
All right. And when did the first unit arrive?
22:05
And how many seconds?
and 55 seconds.
So it's about 7 minutes later, after the call, that the fire department gets in?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. So, because you talked to the initial reporting party, you know that the fire department was called because somebody saw a fire, right?
Obviously, yes.
Okay. And so what we know is this fire was burning for 7 minutes at a minimum, right?
At a minimum, yes.
Had to have been burning from the time it was seen until the fire department got there, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Could I have a second, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You referenced previously when you were talking to prosecution that some things were seized out from the inside of the car, like the stuff in the cans, right?
That was some of it, yes.
Other stuff that was seized from inside of the car included women's clothing, is that right?
I do believe so, yes.
And it also included other things that appeared to be...
There were other items, correct.
And you were present when all this was happening, so you observed that when you seized those things from inside the car, you knew you would give them to CBI agents, right?
Yes,
Okay. And then they had a canopy set up next to the car, right?
I believe they did, yes.
And they're putting all these items that had been in the car out on the ground underneath this canopy, right?
I believe they were on a tarp.
Okay. But I mean, they're putting them on the ground, right?
Yes, some of them were, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing further.
Mr. Rubenstein, redirect whenever you're ready, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
I want to start again talking about this 10 minutes because I'm very confused about something that Mr. Colvin was asking you.
Okay.
He said that you said that the shortest possible scenario in your mind was 10 minutes.
Roughly, yeah, just as an estimate, yes.
Okay. It could be longer, and how much longer depended on all sorts of factors you were unable to
Correct.
determine. And then, when Mr. Colvin was giving you this scenario, he was backing that 10 minutes up from the time the fire was put out.
I believe that was the case, yes, yes.
And so he then showed you the time of the call and the time of the first arrival. And by that 7 minutes or so, that would mean that from the time that the person saw the fire, it would have only been 3 minutes?
No, from the time they saw the fire, it would be 7 minutes until their response, or until they arrived on scene. Is that what you're asking?
No.
Perhaps I didn't understand exactly what you asked.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you again that incident chronology, page 11, 995. Okay? Would this refresh your memory as to the exact times of the calls? and
Yeah.
everything? Okay. Now, and maybe I'm mistaken, but as I understood what Mr. Colvin was asking, and what I thought your answer was that from the time the fire was put out,
Uh-huh.
it could be as short as 10 minutes that the fire started.
It could be as short as that, yes.
And then if you use that, what time was the fire, what time did they arrive on scene to put the fire out?
They arrived at 22:05:55.
Okay, and so if you back that up 10 minutes, that gets you to what time?
A math question, great.
9:55 p.m.?
Basically, yes.
Okay, and the time of the call was at what time?
Time of call was 21:58:07.
So 9:58.
Correct.
So if I'm understanding what your testimony is that the fire could get from the match being thrown to the point, and you interviewed Sarah Sanford, right?
Yes, I believe we did.
Okay, and so you're aware of her statement of what it looked like when she first saw
Yeah,
it.
yes, I am.
So, vehicle engulfed in flames. Fire and flames billowing out or shooting out of the car's interior. Could that happen in 3 minutes with a vehicle that had the doors closed and the windows closed?
Probably not. It would involve a lot of special circumstances, but most likely not.
And if it was to be hot enough that in 3 minutes that happened, would the vehicle have looked like it looked when you guys arrived?
No, I would assume it'd be much more involved.
Okay, so this 10-minute scenario, do you think that matches up with what you observed and what you know of as far as the reports in this case?
Right.
It does match up, or the 10 minutes is 10 minutes backed up from where in your opinion?
10 minutes, in my estimation, from the time it was reported, the witness saw the fire, I would assume, based on her testimony and based on the evidence, that fire had burned approximately 10 minutes, give or take, prior to her witnessing it, based on the extent of the fire at that point. That's not to count the time that the first arriving engine company had to get there, so that would have given it somewhat more time to burn.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Am I understanding
Based on
that?
the evidence of what you know in this case, you think more likely scenario, 10 minutes backed up from the 9:58 call?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct.
I wanted to ask you about Mr. Colvin made a statement to you, if you want to start a fire, you would use more gasoline rather than less. And I think your answer to that was yes. As an arson investigator, you're familiar with the idea that sometimes people want to start a fire and get away from the fire before anybody sees them start it.
As a general, most arsonists don't like to be in the general area, for obvious reasons, yes.
Okay, so from your experience as an arson investigator, if you want to start a fire where you're starting an arson, criminal type arson fire, you would not necessarily use more gasoline rather than less.
That's true. You may want it to start slowly and give yourself time to leave the scene. Depends on the individual and the amount of fuel, obviously.
Okay, and from your investigation of this case, this appeared to be an arson.
It would be my assumption, yes.
Okay. Is that the sort of information that people who are trained as typical general firefighters know? More gasoline means faster fire?
A lot of them are aware of that. Depends on their degree of training.
The door handles on the ground, those can melt off, right?
Very well have done that, yes.
How much force does a 1 3/4 inch fire hose cause?
It's considerable. I don't know the exact amount. I'd have to look at charts.
Is it something that a person would want to be on the other end of?
Probably not.
Okay.
They put out a lot of pressure. I think everyone has seen the capability of a fire hose when it's fully open and charged.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I have nothing further.
Recross, Mr. Colvin, whenever you're ready, please. Yes, sir. Thank you.
I didn't mean to confuse you if I confused you before. We talked about the fact that when we were trying to figure out these times here, we were talking till the fire people got there, right?
I assumed you meant the time that the fire had burned before the first arriving company was on scene.
Okay. But we did talk about this time frame included that time up until the fire people were there. You remember that?
I do.
Okay. I mean, we've talked about two different things now. We've talked about the concept that there's so many variables, you can't say anything with certainty about the fire, right? That's a fact.
In reference to what?
Well, all
There's a lot of things
variables-
obviously are just interpretations on our part, yes, if that's what you're asking.
So bottom line is, we don't know anything for absolute certain on how long this fire took, other than we know it burned for 7 minutes, 'cause-
Correct, yeah.
Called it.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. And then you've kind of told us an hour is the outer limit, right?
Well, that would be far on the outside, yes. I wouldn't expect it to have burned that long, no.
Okay. So you, don't let me put words in your mouth, okay? Don't let me confuse you.
I won't.
All right. So, we don't know for sure how long the fire burned, right?
We do not.
Okay. But then you said, I thought 15 minutes was a good guess, right?
That was just an estimate, yes, that would be a good estimate.
Okay.
Total time.
And
From-
then, I think you said little as 10 minutes could be a good estimate, right?
That could be, yeah, it could very well have been.
And you agree when you testified previously, you said 5 to 10 minutes could be the lower end, right?
Originally, yes, and it could have been.
Okay.
We have no way of knowing.
So the problem is when we start playing this game of figuring out backwards based upon these estimates, kind of puts you in a problem of you don't know how long the fire lasted, right?
No, I don't. I have no way of knowing that.
What we know for a fact is it was burning at least 7 minutes.
Obviously.
And we know for a fact that it didn't burn for more than an hour, right?
I would assume that, yeah.
And once we start trying to say specifically where someone was based upon the amount of time, now we're just guessing, right?
It would be educated guesses, yes, that's all they are.
Educated, because you know more about how fire works than most of us do, right?
I would assume so.
I mean, you're trained in it, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But the educated guess started out when you testified with, I can't say for certain because of all the variables, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So when the prosecution asks you to say that this fire couldn't have been within 10, couldn't have been going for less than 3 minutes because of the damage and stuff, you got an educated guess as an answer, right?
I don't understand what you're asking, sir.
Prosecution just talked to you and they said, well, 10 minutes, if you take away the 7 minutes the fire was shooting out after it's called in, that's only 3 minutes.
Correct?
This fire couldn't possibly be done in 3 minutes.
It could have, but an educated guess would be that no, it was not. It was burning longer than that.
Okay. I don't think prosecution actually said it couldn't possibly be.
Well, there's always a possibility, but it,
Right. So your educated guess is it didn't happen that way. But
Correct.
You don't know for sure.
I don't know for sure, no.
You don't know for sure it lasted for 10 minutes.
I do not.
You don't know for sure how long it smoldered, if that's what was going on with the windows up and the doors closed, right?
That's correct.
You don't know for sure that the windows hadn't been busted out before the fire was set.
I don't know that, no.
You don't know for sure whether or not air was getting into the car from somewhere else.
I don't know that.
You don't know for sure how airtight a Ford Focus is from this make and model.
I do not.
You don't know for sure how much air was coming into the vehicle feeding the fire, even if the windows were shut, right?
I don't know that, no.
Okay. These are all examples of variables that without the answer to, you can't say anything for positively certain, right?
In reference to that, no, sir.
Okay. So the one thing that you can say for sure is, looks to you like, educated guess, 15 minutes is fair, right?
I would say that would be a fair estimation, yes.
Educated guess, 10 minutes, that's a fair estimation?
Yeah, yes, it would.
But once we go beyond that, then we get into this game we started out with. Go up by a minute, go down by a minute.
It's impossible to say it, though.
It is.
Thank you.
Mr. Rubenstein.
Nothing else on that, Your Honor, and the people do not object to him being released from subpoena.
Any objection, Mr.
We don't
Coleman?
object.
You're released from your subpoena, sir, and free to go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. The people's next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Lincoln Folkers to the stand.
Feel free to stretch if anybody wishes. Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. If you could approach, I'll give you an oath before you testify. We have a black cord stretched across your walkway. Thank you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, sir. If you have a seat in the green chair by the microphone, please. Thank you. You can proceed whenever you're ready, Mr. Rubenstein.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you please tell the jury your full name, and since they're both a little unusual, if you could spell both your first and last?
Sure. My name's Lincoln Folkers, Lincoln. Last name is Folkers.
How are you currently employed?
I'm currently employed as a health, safety, and environment manager for oil and gas company in San Antonio, Texas.
And do you also live in San Antonio, Texas now?
I do.
In 2007, were you employed by the Grand Junction Fire Department?
I was.
How long were you prior to your current employment? Well, let me ask you first. Prior to your current employment, were you working for the Grand Junction Fire Department?
Yes.
Immediately prior?
Yeah. No, there was a job in between that.
Okay. When did you separate employment with Grand Junction?
In January of 2013.
How much experience, how many years have you been in fire and EMS?
I started in fire and EMS in January of 2001 and worked through January of 2013. So 12 years.
And was all of that in Grand Junction?
It was.
What were your duties when you first started?
I was a firefighter, paramedic, or actually I was just hired as a firefighter in 2001. So it was responding to fires and emergency medical calls, and eventually went to paramedic school, and then just continued my career path in there.
Did you engage in any training for arson investigation?
I did. In 2005, in 2004, I began shadowing the arson investigation team, just a little bit, nothing formal at that point. In 2005, I formalized the process where I would actually shadow with a current investigator and spend some time learning about arson investigations, decided that it was something that I would like to do, and began my formal training as a fire and arson investigator in 2005.
What does that formal training involve?
I went to the National Fire Academy in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and attended the basic arson and post-fire investigation course, and then attended the Denver Fire Seminar, which was also a post-fire investigation course looking at different aspects of that. And then later on, went back and took an advanced course at the National Fire Academy, and I don't remember if that was 2005 or 6, but it was right around there that I took the advanced course in fire and arson investigation there as well.
How many fires have you reported to throughout your career?
Reported to or investigated?
Reported to.
Too many to count, sir.
How many were you part of the investigation team?
Somewhere around 20, 25.
And were you the lead on most of those or some of those?
I was the lead on some of them, yes.
Did you, do you regularly communicate with other arson investigators about your findings, conclusions, other things that you discuss as new technology or new issues develop?
I guess I don't understand what you're
Do
asking.
you talk to other arson investigators and compare notes on what you're doing and how to do
On
things?
different cases and things like that?
Yes, sir.
Yes, absolutely.
At this time, I'd move to qualify Mr. Folkers as an expert in arson investigation.
Do you have an objection, Mr. Colvin?
No, sir.
I do find the witness is so qualified, he'll be allowed to express his opinions as an arson investigator.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Falkers, well, what is your title now?
I'm an HSE manager, so Health, Safety, and Environment Manager.
Is Mr. Falkers okay?
It is, thank you.
On July 2nd of 2007, did you get a call from Doug Lucas?
I did.
And what was that in regards to?
It was in regards to a vehicle fire that had occurred the night before. Doug asked me if I would come and assist in the arson investigation and be part of that arson investigation team.
When did you report to that scene?
I think I reported to the fire station prior to that to collect our tools. I was briefed on kind of what the situation was surrounding the fire, and then I think we reported to the scene somewhere around 1 or 1:30 that afternoon,
Okay, so to make sure I'm understanding,
roughly. I don't remember exact times, I'm sorry.
you said you were briefed on the situation. Were you told that the fire was the night before?
Yes, I was told the fire was the night before, and in fact, we were told that the vehicle that had burned was owned or registered to Paige Birchfeld.
Okay, so you
So-
knew what you were walking into
Yes,
as
sir, I
far
did.
as that. Okay, was the vehicle still at the scene where it had been suppressed?
Yes,
Okay. You said you got there around 1:30.
somewhere right in there, yes, 1:30, somewhere in that neighborhood. I don't remember exact times.
Is it part of your standard investigation practice to photograph the area?
Absolutely.
And do you photograph just the vehicle, or do you photograph the surrounding area?
No, we photograph, we take frame of reference photos. So we would photograph, if you'll picture it as a big circle, we would photograph, when possible, standing inside the circle, we would photograph the outside area of the circle so that we have reference to where it was taken. And then we turn inwards and we start drawing that circle down a little bit closer and taking photos around the area of the fire that we burned, or of the area of the fire, I'm sorry.
And did that occur in this case?
It did.
May I approach, Owner?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm going to hand you what's marked People's Exhibits 515 through 548, and I've previously shown these to Defense Counsel.
Thank you.
If I could just have you quickly flip through those and see if you recognize what they are.
Okay. Yeah, these would be photos of the actual scene, pictures taken similarly to what I described, facing outward and then facing inward. The vehicle that had burned is also in these pictures. And then looks like there's several close-up photos of the vehicle itself.
Do those photos fairly and accurately depict what the scene looked like when you were out there the next morning after the fire, as well as what the vehicle looked like?
Yes,
And that's what it looked like when you were conducting your arson investigation?
to the best of my recollection, yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I'd move to admit People's Exhibits 515 through 548.
Mr. Colvin, any objection?
No objection, Judge.
People's Exhibits 515 through and including 548 are all admitted.
And I'd ask to publish them electronically.
Any objection, Mr. Colvin?
No, sir.
You can publish those exhibits. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Falkers, those are going to appear electronically behind you, and in the bottom left corner, there should be a number, so we just want to make sure that we're identifying which picture we're looking at any given point. Sorry, we have to look something up quickly.
That's fine.
Okay, so is that picture 515?
Yes, that is picture Exhibit 515.
And that appears to be a photograph of the intersection of 23 Road and Logos Drive, is that right?
That is correct.
Is that the closest intersection to where you were?
It is.
Okay, if I could, Ms. Watson, if I could have you go to the next one. Okay, so what is this?
This is Exhibit 516, and this is a picture that I described earlier as we started taking pictures in a circular motion around the outside area of where the fire occurred. This would be a picture of Walker SMS, and if memory serves, this picture was taken by the photographer standing in the dirt parking lot. I don't know how near the car they were at this point, but it was standing in the dirt parking lot taking that picture.
Okay, so the parking lot that the red Ford Focus was in is the same parking lot where the photographer is standing?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. 517, please.
So this would be a picture looking to the north towards the Book Cliffs. And again, it's just a reference photo to give us an idea of the area as to where the photos or the incident occurred.
And Judge, may I approach the TV briefly?
Yes, that's fine, thank
As
you.
soon as it comes back. So, Mr. Falker, is it? Okay, so where's the parking lot that you're talking about in relation to this photograph?
I think it's right, I'm sorry, I think it's right in this area, if my memory is correct. But actually, it may be on this side because that's looking north, and if I'm not mistaken, Walker SMS sits on the west side of the road, so it is probably on this side.
Okay, so just for the record, that's just off to the bottom left.
Thank you for making that record.
No? And then this road that's being photographed, this is 23?
23 road.
Going, facing north?
Yes,
And this hump in the road, is that where it goes over I-70?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Watson, if you go to the next one. And this is picture 518.
This is Exhibit 518.
Okay,
Yes,
so
sir.
now we are looking at Walker SMS on the left. Where in relation to this photograph is the parking lot that the vehicle
The
is?
parking lot in relation to this photograph would be down off the picture at the bottom left-hand side.
Okay, and at this point, is this where you start to essentially pan left?
I believe so.
In the photographs?
I believe that's how the pictures are sequenced through there.
Okay, Ms. Watson, 519, please.
Yeah, so it's continuation, basically starting north and moving around counterclockwise in a circle is how it appears that these pictures were taken.
Okay, Ms. Watson, 520. Still doing that?
Still doing that, yes?
521, please. Same?
Uh-huh,
522? Same?
yes, sir.
523?
This is the same, we're still continuing around, but we're starting to actually show portions of the scene where the fire occurred.
Okay, and behind this wood
Right here?
post, that's the Colorado Bureau of Investigation traveling crime scene van?
Correct.
Okay, so that was on scene for purposes of your investigation, as opposed to, that wasn't,
That's
that wasn't there
correct.
as part of Walker SMS?
That's
that was part
correct.
of
It
what
was,
you-
it was in relation to this investigation, yes.
Okay, and then 524, please?
Again, just a continuation of those pictures. You can actually see the vehicle that was burned in this picture, along with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation van.
Okay, so on the far left is the red Ford Focus, and is that
Yes,
in
those-
its location as when you arrived?
Yes.
Okay, you didn't move it at all?
No, sir.
Okay. Next one, Ms. Watson? Thank you. And it's just continue.
This is the same situation. We're looking at the crime scene. The deputies were controlling access to the scene. You had to actually sign in and sign out when you came in and when you came out. And I don't remember who the deputies were that were on that day.
So the yellow tape is the controlled part?
I believe so, yes.
Next one, please, Ms. Watson?
Just a continuation of the 360-degree photos. This one looks to be shot towards the southwest, so as we started, we moved from north, and we're headed almost due south at this point.
Okay, next one, please.
The continuation, this one I believe would probably be pretty much due south, looking due south at this point.
Okay, and 528, please, Ms. Watson.
This one will be looking to the southeast.
Okay, and you're familiar with this case?
I am.
The investigation of the disappearance of Ms. Bergfeld. What is in the background right behind the field?
Bob Scott RVs?
Okay, you're familiar that that was of significance to the investigation?
Yes.
Okay, and Ms. Watson, if you go to the next one, 529. And so we're now,
So now we've turned our camera angle around, and rather than looking kind of from the outside in, we're starting to work on the inner circle and start shooting our photos more towards the inside, a 360 of the car, of the item that had been burned.
okay. 530, please.
This is a view of the rear of the vehicle with the trunk open.
Now, when the vehicle was initially, let me ask you first, do you, as part of your normal arson investigation, do you rely on the statements from the fire crew that shows up to put out the fire?
Absolutely.
Okay. Was the trunk lid open or closed when they arrived?
I don't recall.
Would looking at your report refresh your
It
memory?
would refresh my memory.
You have a large set of reports. Do you know which one?
It would have probably been in my initial report, I would imagine.
So, sir, I'm going to hand you several reports. What
Okay.
I would ask is at whatever point you determine which report you are looking at to refresh your memory. Yes. If I can touch on it.
Yes, sir, thank you.
Which report you're looking at to refresh your memory, if you could just identify the page number down there so that
Okay.
Mr. Coleman knows to work as well. And I might direct your attention to page 12,024, near the bottom.
12,024?
Yes, sir. The second to bottom paragraph.
Okay, yep. So you're correct, 12,024, and it says in here that the trunk lid was opened during extinguishment just by lifting it up.
So it wasn't locked, latched,
Correct.
but it was sort of closed.
It was closed, but they were just able to lift on the trunk lid and open the trunk.
Okay, so this photograph is showing it after it had been opened,
Correct.
okay? And then if I could have you just continue through, Ms. Watson, if you could go to the next photograph, is 531. So now you're just continuing around the passenger side of the vehicle?
We are continuing around the passenger side of the vehicle, just taking photos and making notes as to the areas that we noticed burn.
Okay, 532, please.
And this is the passenger side of the vehicle. Again, during our process, we're just noting areas that we would like to look further into.
Okay, 533, please.
More of a close-up of an area that was burned on the passenger's, front passenger door of the vehicle.
534?
This is from the front corner panel, or front quarter of the vehicle. It's on the passenger side, showing the damage on the passenger's front door and the hood being bent somewhat there.
What's the cause of the hood being bent like that?
That would have been done during extinguishment operations. The fire crew would have normally opened the hood to cut battery cables and check for presence of fire under the hood. Obviously, they were unable to get the hood all the way open, so they typically fold the hood up in that manner so that they can get to the battery and just clip the cables.
Okay, so that damage was caused by fire crews,
Correct.
as far as your understanding. Okay. 535, please.
535 shows, the driver's side front corner of the vehicle and down the driver's side of the vehicle as well.
536.
More of the driver's side door. Some of the burn patterns are noted in here, or the burned areas are noted in here on this side.
Why don't you tell us what you're seeing in picture 536 as far as your expert opinion as to the origin of the fire?
So when you look at fire or you look at burn patterns in a vehicle, you look for a couple different things. You look for the depth of burn or the length of burn. And one of the ways that you can tell that is if you look on the outside or the peripheral edges of the driver's side door here, you can see that there's still paint remaining. The paint's actually charred, but there is still paint remaining here. And as you get down more in the center of this area, I don't know if can we go back an exhibit?
Sure.
To the passenger side where we can actually see that, because it really displays that evidence well, and then you can see on the driver's side, maybe. So here's more what I'm talking about. So when you have, I'm sorry.
Sir, for the record, this is 533?
Yes, it is 533.
Thank you.
So when you look at this, you see this area right here in the center that is very shiny. That tells you that the fire and the heat actually contacted that area longer. And as it moves out, it may not have had such a great length of burn on that area. So it was very intense in that one area of this door. And on the driver's side door, we can go back to that now if you'd like. Yeah, that works right there. On the driver's side door, exhibit 537, you see much of the same type of patterning, but it's more widespread, where the carbon residue that's been left, the soot that you would get on something that's been left, has either been completely burned away, may have partially been washed away a little bit in the fire, but you'll get those deep char, that black char that'll stay even after a power wash. And you can sort of see the I don't even know the word for it, the pattern where the water has run on that door when it was hot, where it's actually pulled some of that carbon away, but you actually have areas like right down here where it's extremely clean burned. And then as you move out, it shows those areas that the fire may have not lasted as long, or may have had more material to get through, metal material that would have protected it from the heat. So if you think about this car, as you shut the door, there's a piece of metal right down in this area that would have acted as somewhat of a protective source. But when you look at both sides of the vehicle, from a fire investigations perspective, it's very evident to me that the fire burned longer and with more intensity on the driver's side of the vehicle.
So just to catch up the record a little bit, right in the middle of the burned area of the driver's side door of picture 537, there are, I guess, two kind of lines that go down and to the left, or down and to the right.
Are you talking about that?
Actually, just above that, just to the right of that. That's what I understood. Is that?
Right in here?
Right, and is that
Yeah.
what you were referring
Yes.
to as the wash pattern?
Yes.
From the
Kind of
extinguishing the fire?
possibly. And I can't determine with 100% certainty that that's it, but I've seen those patterns like that from water running over it when it's hot.
And then where on the door it's still red paint, that's where the protected area from the door frame of the car?
Yes, I would assume that it would, basically down here, you would have where it seals, and there's that lip of metal. It would not have allowed the exterior of this door to experience as much direct heat as just above that, where once it burns through that door panel and door liner, this has direct exposure to the fire. And you can actually see there's a very clear spot right here where you can tell that the fire had burned intensely and for a longer duration than it did even up in here. I'm sorry, it's right in the center of the door, approximately, I would say 6 inches off the bottom.
Thank you.
And then there's something that looks like a U-shaped rope-looking thing right in the middle of the door?
Yes, this.
What is that?
This is actually, when the window rolls up, this would have gone into the upper door frame. And it's the part with the felt on it that your window would have sealed into when it rolled up and rolled down. The reason it looks roped is because it's actually made of, it's got a metal spine in it that's bendable, and then the felt that lays over the top of that. It just keeps the window from rattling.
Were you able to determine anything about the position of the windows from your investigation?
Yeah, the windows, the mechanisms on the windows were complete, you know, the handle to roll the window down or whatever was completely burned away. We didn't know that it was, what position it was in, other than being able to look at the actual mechanism inside the door, and they were in the up position.
And when you talk about the mechanism, are you talking about the thing that holds the piece
The
of
piece that
glass?
holds the glass was actually in the up position, and based on that finding, we assumed the windows were up during the time of the fire.
Okay. And at the point that they arrived, the windows had exploded out, or,
The windows were gone at the time that the fire department had arrived.
and do you know if they exploded or melted or?
Well, in some of the later pictures, you can actually see a portion of the windshield laying over the dash, and it had, the glass hadn't melted, but the plastic sheet inside the glass had actually allowed the broken glass to stay together and just fold up on the dash. These pieces of glass were gone. I wouldn't necessarily say that they exploded, but they burst. The windows burst from the heat.
Okay. And were there in fact little pieces of glass up along the edges?
There were.
On some of those windows?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Watson, if I could have you go to 538. What can you tell about the difference between and the shape of the pattern on the back passenger door?
The back passenger door, and if you relate it to the front passenger door, the burn is much higher on the back passenger door, which leads me to believe that the fire wasn't as intense down below, even though the entire interior of the car was consumed. The fire burned more intensely at a higher level in the back of the car. And if you look at this, I don't know exactly what height the seat cushion that you would have sat on would have been, but your fire burns up and out. And if the fire was in the seat cushion, it would make sense that the fire was higher in this area. Whereas the driver's seat sits a little bit lower towards the floorboard, and potentially the materials dropping down on the floorboard and the fire being on the floorboard of the driver's side would cause that lower burn in there.
Ms. Watson, if you could go to 539. What are we looking at here?
Oh, this is a picture that was taken from the passenger side. We were standing outside the passenger side front door, and it's actually looking through the front of the vehicle, and this would be the driver's door on the interior, on the opposite side. And what you're seeing here is the steering column of the vehicle. So you can see that the actual steering wheel had completely burned away and was not there. You can see, I believe, this is part of the windshield that I was referring to earlier, and then the metal frame of the dash, this would be the stereo, and then some wiring harnesses and things right in here.
Okay, so you're pointing the laser around the, sort of right in the middle, maybe just up to the right of middle is where you're
Yes, sir.
moving around the different pieces of the dash?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Watson, if you can go to 540, please.
Again, this picture was taken from the passenger side, looking in the front passenger's window. What you're seeing in the top, or well, kind of the center, more left-hand side, that M-shaped piece of metal would have been the headrest for the driver's seat, and then the driver's seat frame was actually there. You can actually see that this metal is completely clean. There is no carbon residue on that. And you have the potential of the intensity of the fire burning as long as it did, along with some washing effect from the water of getting rid of some of that residue or burning that residue completely off.
And the bottom seat cushion, did that look similar?
There wasn't a bottom seat cushion. It
I mean,
was,
the area, the metal
Yes,
area
it
where
did.
the bottom seat cushion
It
would have
did.
been. And you were just
On the-
pointing your laser at
I'm sorry.
at the backrest for the driver's seat, right?
yeah, this headrest right here.
Okay.
Oh, are you talking about the backrest?
Yes.
Yeah, this would be the backrest of the seat. This would be the headrest of the seat.
And it's your opinion that the fire was started in the floorboard area of that seat? Is that correct?
I would say that the fire was started in the driver's side, low on the driver's side, yes.
Okay. What about, is it your opinion that that there was a lot of accelerant put onto the backrest? Or would that have caused a different burn pattern on that back door?
I don't know that I would say that there were a lot of accelerants put on the backrest. I know that the fire burned very intensely, and with the position of that seat, it even reinforces what I said earlier, that was exposed to much greater heat for a longer time. But once the fire gets started, the accelerant doesn't necessarily make a hotter fire, but it actually accelerates the rate of fire growth. So if, for instance, you used a quart of gasoline, you're going to burn the gasoline off, and we're trying to get, when you use gasoline, you're trying to get the fuel source, whether the fuel source be a cushion or whether it be plastics or whatever, you're trying to get that fuel source hot enough to start off-gassing so that it can be consumed as well. So an accelerant isn't necessarily used to create a hotter fire faster. It's used to create a faster fire and get the fuels that you really want consumed,
Which are the cushions?
which are
and
the cushions and things like that, to burn at a rate, or not at a rate, but to burn quicker, to start off-gassing so that they can be consumed. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Watson, if you could go to 541, please.
Again, this is a picture taken from the passenger side, looking in through the passenger window as well as seeing into the back seat. What you're seeing right through the window, kind of center left on the screen, is the top of the backrest of the passenger seat and the headrest. And then behind that would be the back of what would have been the rear seat in this vehicle.
Ms. Watson, could I have you zoom in on this on the top left? May I approach her? Yes, thank you. Is this the sort of glass that you were talking about that was?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so that's just in the passenger's window as well as the back passenger's window?
Yes, there's glass residue in the passenger's window as well as the top of the rear window on the passenger side.
Did that further support your belief that the windows were up at the time?
It does.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Watson, if you could go to 542, please. Anything significant about this picture?
I don't know how clear it is. You can see it somewhat. It's in the very top right-hand corner above the driver's area. The metal on the roof right there is very, very clean burned. There's not a lot of any residue as a result of the fire on top of that. And if you compare it to the other areas, it appears like it has some warp. And I believe there's some photos that actually show a better picture of the roof. But it also supports my belief that the fire was started on the driver's side of the vehicle.
Are you able to tell if it was more floorboard versus seat versus backrest?
No. All I'm able to tell you is it started in the passenger, or the driver's seat of the passenger compartment.
Okay. Ms. Watson,
Driver's area, I'm sorry, it could have been floor or seat, but in that driver's area.
543, please, Ms. Watson.
This is a picture taken from the driver's side, rear window, looking across to the passenger side. And what you see kind of center screen would be the backrest for, I can't tell if that's, I believe that's passenger's backrest right there. And then the door, the rear door of the passenger side, you can see the door panel where it's been burned, and most of the components of that door have melted and run down the door. It does appear that there is still partial speaker left in that door, which would speak to, you know, the fire being less intense on the passenger side of that vehicle than it was on the driver's side.
All right, thank you, Ms. Watson. 544, please. Thank you.
So this is looking through the rear driver's side window, looking towards the front of the vehicle. This is what I believe was the radio in the center of the dash, right in the center of this photo. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can actually see the glass very well in this, where it's melted and kind of dropped out onto the dash.
And you're pointing at through the driver's side window?
Yes, sir.
And then up top on the driver's side window, is that more of that glass that's the door frame there?
I can't tell from this picture.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Watson, 545, please. What's significant about this?
This picture is significant because it speaks to the presence of smoke and heat in this trunk compartment. And as you can see, the trunk, there's a seal that goes around, and I'm pointing around the outside perimeter of the trunk opening. There's a rubber seal that goes all the way around that, and that rubber seal actually matches the soot pattern that's on the inside of the trunk lid. So with the smoke and heat coming through that, it was much less intense. It did melt some of the carpet away, but it did not consume the carpet. It didn't burn it. But it deposited a lot of smoke and soot on the trunk lid. But what's notable about it is this basket did not catch fire. It was not burned in there. And there were some other articles in there that had not been consumed, as well as the rubber gasket. Doesn't even look like it had melted much.
Just from life experience, I'm guessing baskets burn at a lower temperature, can catch fire at a lower temperature?
I would say that they can catch fire at a lower temperature.
And what else, what are the types of items were in the back?
I believe there was a leather jacket, or maybe it wasn't leather. There was a jacket of some sort in there, and some other clothing items.
Ms. Watson, 546, please.
This is just another picture of the basket that was inside the trunk. You can see that it's got some smoke damage, but it's very clear that there was no fire impingement, no active fire in the trunk that would have consumed this basket.
547, please.
These are pieces right here of the, center kind of bottom right side, pieces of the trunk carpeting that had melted and fallen away. And then right in the center of the picture, about halfway up through the top of the screen, is a gap. And this vehicle had seats that would lay down to allow somebody to put something in the trunk that was longer. So this gap would have allowed some of that heat and smoke to come into the trunk once the rest of this had melted away.
Okay. 548, please.
And this is the jacket that I was referring to that was in the trunk. Again, you can see that it has some smoke damage, but there was no fire damage on this jacket.
Here, may I have just a moment?
Yes, sir.
Just want to talk a little bit about some of the items that were in the vehicle. Do you recall locating an insurance card?
I do not.
What about any business cards?
I do remember some business cards,
Do you
yes.
remember what the business cards were of?
I believe they were Pampered Chef.
And tell me about the engine compartment.
The engine compartment was completely unremarkable. There was no evidence that there was any fire or even heat inside that engine compartment that could have led to a vehicle fire of this magnitude.
Would looking at your report refresh your memory as to whether or not there was an insurance card?
It may.
If I could direct you to page 12,000. First of all, is that the second page of a report? 12,000?
Yes,
And is that your report?
yes.
If I could have you look at page 12,000. The paragraph beginning, the investigation progressed, and three lines up from the bottom.
Yes, I do see that, and I don't have a direct recollection of finding the insurance card, but I put it in my report, and based on my report, there was an insurance card found in the vehicle.
Did it have a name on it?
It did. It says it had a name of Dixon.
If I can, Jeff, just a moment. Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for the witness at this time.
Mr. Colvin.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can I approach the witness to address the exhibits?
No, he just put it up here.
Could I ask you, Ms. Watson, to please put up 547? Can I approach the screen, Judge?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This line in the center of this picture you referenced that goes from about halfway down the picture up to the top,
Yes, sir.
that's the gap, is that correct?
It is.
And by gap, what we're talking about is, these are metal plates that the back seats lean against, right?
Yes, that would be the metal backing of the seats.
And then they fold down.
Yes,
And so that's how you make, the place where you put your dog or whatever, right?
sure.
Okay. Air obviously can go through there, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's just a clear shot into the passenger car compartment, right?
not with the cushions in place, it wouldn't be, sir.
No, I understand when the cushions are there, it's not, but that is a gap between the seats that the cushions fill in, right?
Yes,
Because you can fold down that side, or you can fold down this side. You don't have to fold them down together.
I would assume so.
The air fires need air, right?
Sure,
Okay. They need fuel, but they also need air, right?
yes,
And if you don't have enough air, then that causes it to, if not smother, it at least tamps down the fire until it can get more air, right?
correct.
Okay. Now, the trunk was not latched, is what you were told, correct?
That is correct.
So, well, I don't know, maybe you know. Do you know if cars are airproof?
I don't believe they are.
Okay. I don't know. But to the extent they would be airproof, having the trunk open, gives access for air to come into the vehicle. Would you agree?
Probably not with the cushions in place, I wouldn't.
So why do you think a car's not airproof?
I'm sorry?
Well, we just said, I asked you if you know a car was airproof, and you said you didn't know, right?
Correct.
But you laughed. I got the impression you don't think it's airtight, right?
No, there's obviously holes that air can get through in a vehicle.
Okay. Where?
Any number of places. I don't know to be specific, sir.
Okay. How is it that you can be certain that seat cushions make it airtight in that area?
I'm not saying that I'm certain. I'm saying that I don't think it's likely when you have two seat cushions, if you think of them like insulation, touching, I think it would be very difficult to move air between two 3-inch thick seat cushions.
Okay. So you clearly have an opinion, and it's apparently a strong one, about the seat cushion thing. Where is it that, in your opinion, air it can come in?
Well, there's holes in vehicles, sir. I mean, I don't know in this particular instance where the air entrainment would have come from. Surely once the cushions burned away or melted somewhat and pulled apart, you would have air entrainment there. But I can't speak to, as, you know, where air would come in the vehicle.
I'm sorry, you lost me. You used a word I'm not sure I heard.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Air
Where-
entrainment?
Entrainment. It's drawing air in.
Okay. That's how
Sorry.
a firefighter says, sucking the air in
It
there.
does, it is.
Okay. So you don't know where there's air entrainment on this vehicle?
I
is
do
that
not.
right? But you do think there is air entrainment?
I think there is a possibility that there's air entrainment on this vehicle, yes.
Okay, that qualified what I asked you. You think it's possible, or you think there was?
I can't speak to whether there was or not. I would assume, based on the fire, that there had to be some level of air entrainment for the fire to continue burning until the windows broke.
Okay. Now, you said that during your testimony and answering questions of prosecution, you said that when the windows burst from the heat. You recall talking about that before? Now, are you testifying today that you know these windows burst from the heat buildup?
I am testifying to the fact that I believe the windows were in the up position, based on the mechanisms being in the up position,
Right?
and the presence of broken glass around the doors, and that heat caused that. Yes, that's what I'm testifying to.
Okay. Now, we know that the windows are broken. That's obvious.
Correct.
Right? We know that there's glass on the ground outside the car, right?
Yes?
We know there's glass inside the car as well, correct?
That's correct.
Now, you've testified previously in this case, right? And was that a yes?
It was a yes, I'm sorry. I guess a nod of the head doesn't get it.
And no, it doesn't, unfortunately. And we've talked before about these windows, right?
We have?
You and I.
Yes.
In a testifying situation.
Yes?
Now, previously, you said that you didn't know if the windows broke because the heat buildup inside the car or potentially the water from the hoses, right?
Based on what's the information in the fire report, the windows were broken when the engine arrived on scene. So the engine did not break the windows. The engine company did not.
I understand that, but didn't you previously testify you didn't know if the water could have caused that? The broken glass inside the car.
I'm not following you, I'm sorry.
Well, if the windows burst out, right, but there's glass in the frame still,
Uh-huh.
and we know there is because we saw a picture with glass,
Yeah.
right? Water could knock the broken glass into the car.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yes. The water, let me clarify, you're not saying that the water actually broke the windows, but that actually pushed glass inside the car?
That could explain why there's glass inside
Yes,
the car. right?
agreed.
Okay. If the heat caused the window to burst out or explode, as the prosecution said, you wouldn't expect to find glass inside though, right?
I didn't say that the window burst out. I said the window burst.
Right. They said the word exploded, and you didn't like that word, right?
I don't agree that it exploded.
Okay, what does burst mean?
With the tempered glass, that glass is designed to break in little square shards.
Sure.
And so when it bursts, it just bursts and typically falls straight out. So by bursting, I mean just completely fracturing all at one time, not necessarily exploding out of the vehicle.
Okay. And it can, when it bursts, it can fall outside of the car, right?
Sure?
So the glass outside makes sense, right? It can also fall inside the car, right?
That's correct.
So the glass inside the car makes sense, right?
Yes.
Glass inside the car would also be consistent with somebody busting the window before they set the fire, right?
Sure.
Okay. And you previously testified that you couldn't say whether or not somebody had broken the windows before the fire was set. You recall that?
I do.
Okay. And that's still true,
That
right?
is still true.
Okay, so we got to be careful what we say that we know and what we're assuming, right?
Okay.
We know the windows are broken, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can see that. We don't know for a fact whether the fire caused the windows to break. Would you agree?
I would agree.
Okay. And certainly, the fire could have caused all the windows to break, right?
Yes.
It could have caused some of the windows to break, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't know how much air is coming in, how much air entrainment is happening. I've learned a word. I'm excited. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We don't know how much air entrainment's happening on this car, right?
Right.
We don't know whether or not any of the windows were whether or not any, if any, of the windows were broken before the fire was set, right?
That's correct.
We don't know how long the fire burned, other than we know when the call came in and we know when fire officials arrived on scene. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And you have been very careful in previous conversations with myself and my investigator to make it clear there's so many variables here, it's impossible to know for certain how long this fire burned. Is that fair?
I think we can narrow it down into, you know, not a specific time frame, but we can say that we know it wasn't over this amount of time based on the fuel load in the vehicle and what the responding fire engine crew said.
Okay. And the outer limit of that, I believe you told us, was about an hour. Is that right?
I don't remember exactly what we talked about. I don't remember if we talked about outer limits. I think maybe 30 minutes, was it,
Okay.
that we talked about? But I don't even believe that it probably burned that long, sir.
And it could have burned quite a bit quicker, right?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. When you testified previously, you indicated once the windows go, I need to look this up, I'm sorry. I think you just testified to this, but I want to make sure I'm on the same page as you. So, you can't say with specificity the amount of time this fire lasted, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And in the previous time you talked about this, you said you thought that it was in the ballpark of 15 minutes, is that right?
That is still my belief.
Okay. But when you say specificity, right, that could be 14 minutes and 42 seconds, or that could be, 13 minutes, 12 minutes, 10 minutes. What are we talking about?
Yeah, I can't determine the exact time the fire burned.
Okay.
What I know is what time the fire was called in by the passerby and what time the engine arrived on scene and the fire conditions they found when they got there.
Okay. So can you say for certain that the fire lasted 8 minutes?
No.
Or more than 8 minutes, I mean?
No, well, obviously it did, because I think the responding time on this was over 8 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't looked at the times. But,
Let's assume, just assume with me, okay?
okay,
Let's assume response time is 7 minutes, okay?
okay,
So could it have burned for 8 minutes?
at least.
Could it have burned 31 minutes?
Potentially, yes.
Okay. So we could do this game for a while and go back and forth, right? What I want to know is how much of a variance off of 15 minutes are you willing to say is plausible?
Give or take 5 to 7 either side.
Okay.
And let me clarify that just a little bit, because now when we get back into that response time, we know that it took X amount, so we can't go below that because we know the fire was burning at that point.
Right. So in my hypothetical, if it was 7 minutes response time, if you're willing to say it could have been give or take 5 or 7 minutes off of 15 minutes, that puts us at 8 minutes, right?
Sure.
Okay. You said, I believe, that once those windows go, 2 to 3 minutes is what it takes for what happens in 2 to 3.
The fire would build very rapidly at that point, because you end up with a lot of rushing air, and the fuel load is very heavy inside the vehicle. When there's not enough air, you have too much fuel and not enough air to burn, so the mixture's not right. And as you add that air, the intensity and the rate of that fire would increase and grow pretty much exponentially until it had consumed the fuels.
Okay, so I'm trying to understand here. Fire, or the windows burst, right? All that air comes rushing in, and in 2 to 3 minutes, what happens once that air goes rushing in?
The fire builds rapidly.
So if this fire had 7 minutes of air rushing in through burst windows, is that the damage you would expect to see?
Well, you reach a point of optimum burn with your fuel and air mixture. So the windows being open, at some point, you get, it's almost an effect where you go from a too rich to a burn to a perfect mixture to burn, and it stays there. The fire will pull the air that it needs and continue to burn. So just having the windows open allows it that ability to breathe and grow and consume the fires on a more, it doesn't actually accelerate the rate of burn after it equalizes. Does that make sense?
I think so. So when you talked about 2 or 3 minutes of more intensity after the windows being burst, you're
Yes.
just talking about the fire is going to go faster for 2 or 3 minutes, and then it hits that equilibrium. Is that?
And then it burns at that probably a sustained rate.
Okay. So if it flares up, that would be a sign of the windows bursting and a bunch of air rushing in, right?
If it I guess if the fire grows all of a sudden,
Okay.
yeah, if the windows were up, yes.
Okay. I mean, that could explain.
It could.
It flaring up,
Yes.
right? There's other explanations for that, of course. It could flare up because it hit some particularly volatile source of fuel, right?
Yeah, it could.
I mean, that would cause a flare-up if it was.
Sure.
And all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
So if there was more accelerant that hadn't been lit, but the fire got to the point where it could light more accelerant, that would cause a flare-up.
I would tend to disagree with that statement. The accelerant has a much lower ignition temperature and would be consumed more rapidly than, say, for instance, a seat cushion.
Well, but if there's a pool of accelerant that's not where the fire is, it's got to get up to that temperature where it'll
Okay.
ignite, right?
Sure.
So if there's accelerant that's not contiguous to the fire, it would, when that accelerant got lit, that would cause a flare-up. Would you agree?
I would.
Previously, you've told us that the absolute inside time for this fire is the response time, right? I mean, it obviously couldn't be less than that.
Correct.
Right? And it sounds like today you're saying a half hour is the outside time. Am I understanding you correctly?
No, I told
Okay.
you 15 minutes, give or take 5 to 7.
Okay. Now I'm talking about, this is where I get all confused because it's really hard to tell specific times, right? Because of all
Right.
the variables. So you can't say anything with specificity, right?
Okay.
No, I'm asking.
I'm sorry, would you ask me again? Because I
Because-
lost you.
Because of all the variables here, it's really difficult for you to say a time with specificity. That's what you said?
I cannot tell you an exact time. That is correct.
And so then we talked, and I was saying outer and inner edges that are realistic, right?
Sure.
And I thought you said today the outer edge of realistic was 30 minutes. Did I misunderstand you?
No, you did not.
Okay.
Of complete reality, depending on what the fire did, but you can't determine that because nobody witnessed the fire burn.
Right.
That-
But here's my question for you. Last time you testified, you talked about the outer edge being less than an hour, right?
I don't recall what we talked about last time.
Okay. I mean, I get a half hour is less than an hour.
Sure.
Right? But because we're talking about these lack of specificity thing, once you start talking about the outer edges of things, it gets really fuzzy, and it's hard to keep track of what's realistic and what's not. Would you agree?
Sure.
Okay. So, bottom line is, not only do we not know with specificity when it happened, but we could come up with scenarios all day long that could fit whatever particular time frame we wanted it to be that are realistic. Would you agree with that?
I think there are a limited number of scenarios that we could use to say to give us an ability to look at times, yes.
Okay. But if we wanted, say the prosecution had a theory and they needed time to be 20 minutes, we can come up with a scenario where that makes sense, right?
Sure.
Okay. But we could also, if they needed the time to be, let's say, 10 minutes, we could come up with a scenario where that makes sense.
No, because we know the response time on this fire was,
For my hypothetical, we're going to say response time was 7 minutes, okay?
okay.
If it was a 7-minute response time, then we could come up with a scenario that make 10 minutes work, right?
I would have a hard time believing that that level of damage could happen in 10 minutes. Because we're talking about a 7-minute response time, and, well, let me back up. I confused myself because I'm actually using a different time. So, yes, you are correct that we could say 10 minutes total burn time. I was looking from an on-scene time, I apologize. But yes, 10 minutes total burn time, yes, you could say that would fit.
So we make different assumptions, and these are all things we don't know the answer to, right? How long it burned, right? But we could come up with a scenario that makes 10 minutes work. We could come up with a scenario that makes 20 minutes work. The problem is...
But I think we're still in that window.
specificity here, right?
I think we're still in that window, right?
Sure. But if the issue is a specific time, we can play with a lot of these variables. Would you agree?
Yes, but I like I told you, I can't come.
Sorry.
Those are admitted exhibits, I believe.
She can have those, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Falkers, now you have me a little bit confused. You said 15 minutes, give or take 5 to 7, which would mean as short as 8, right?
Yeah, I'm saying 5 to 7 on the outside, yes, both directions.
Okay.
I lean more towards the 15 plus. The only reason I say the 5 to 7 on the give or take is we know the response time was approximately 8 minutes.
3 seconds shy of 8 minutes.
Yes.
Which means that at the point that the phone call came in, the fire would have just literally started 3 seconds earlier.
Yes.
And as part of your job as an arson investigator, you talked to the people who reported the fire, right?
We do.
And you did in this case.
We did.
And what is your understanding of what the fire looked like at the point that she called it in?
I believe that she stated the fire was blowing out the windows, was billowing out the windows when she called the fire in.
Okay. So there are a lot of variables, but you know some of those variables in this particular case, right?
I do.
Okay, so some of those variables are whether the windows were up or down when the fire started, right?
Correct?
That's one of them. And based on the information you have, you believe that the windows were,
I believe the windows were up at the time the fire started.
which would make it more towards longer rather than shorter,
Correct.
okay? Whether the doors were open or closed at the point the fire started. Would that be one as well?
I believe the doors were closed at the time the fire was started.
Okay, and that would lean more towards
A
longer or
longer
shorter?
duration.
Now, you mentioned something about when the windows blow out, there's a 2 to 3 minute period where oxygen rushes in, and then what happens?
Well, it's not where oxygen rushes in. It would be rapid fire growth over that 2 to 3 minute period because of the fresh air coming into the fire and creating an equilibrium between the fuel and the oxygen so that the fire would burn more readily.
Does that change the way the fire looks? Like the color of it?
It could change the color. If you think of like a cutting torch that has a very blue tip, or a welding torch that has a very blue tip, that's because that gas and air mixture is absolutely perfect. That's a very hot flame. And when you look at a flame like this, and it depends on the fuel, the plastics and the foams and things in there would tend to burn, especially if they're oxygen lacking or the mixture is just not right, would burn more orange or more yellow, and probably more towards the orange side of that. When a fire has a really good oxygen mixture like you would see in the fireplace, you'll have wisps of blue and maybe some white color in there along with a nice yellow color. But when it gets orange, it's showing you that your fuel is higher and your oxygen or your air ratio is off a little bit, and the fuel is actually higher than the air.
Okay. And then you were aware as part of this that Miss Scott first called her dad when she first saw the fire, and then he said to call 911.
Yes.
And then she called 911. So that 9:58, she probably saw the fire at some point before that, because other stuff happened.
Prosecution's testifying.
I'm asking him,
The objection sustained. Try to rephrase.
would you agree that that this probably happened at some point before that because some things had to
Yes,
happen?
I would agree because she had to take the time to make the phone call to her father.
Okay. And so backing up how long it would take to get to the point of billowing flames out of the car, at the point that she first saw it and called her dad, how long?
We don't know. We don't know when the windows broke.
Okay.
And if we could determine the time in this fire that the windows broke, we would have a much better estimation as to a time when the fire was started.
Okay. And your expert opinion is that this fire was on the 15-plus side, not the
Yes,
15-minus?
that is correct.
Okay. Thank you. No further questions.
Mr. Colvin.
I think we saw a very good example of, let's make assumptions. And we had just talked about, we got to keep track of what we're assuming and what are facts, right?
Okay?
So you made some statements. You believe that we should back the time off a little bit because it took some time to make the phone call, right?
It took some time for her to call her father, which I would agree.
Okay. How much time?
2 minutes, 1 minute?
Well, which is it?
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
So we don't have that fact. We've got an assumption. Would you agree?
Yes?
Okay. You believe the car windows were up and all of them were intact, right?
I believe the car windows were up at the time the fire was set, yes.
And they were all intact.
That is my belief, that the
Right.
windows were up and that they were intact at the time the fire was set. That is correct.
So that's an assumption, not a fact.
Okay?
Do you agree?
Yes?
Okay. The length of time of this fire, you've testified repeatedly, you can't say with specificity, right?
That is correct.
And that one, we know for a fact, you can't say it with specificity, right?
Correct.
But when they give you assumptions that you agree with, then you give them a time of 15 minutes or more, right?
And I think I said that with you,
Okay.
that I lean towards that more, the more 15 or more side than I would below 15 minutes.
I understand that. But that's because the assumptions that they're presenting you with lean in that direction, right?
No, sir, that's my own opinion.
But it's your opinion based upon things that you're assuming, right?
It's my opinion based on evidence that I saw at the fire as far as the level of destruction,
Now,
sir.
Mr. Folkers, part of the reason you believe the time is because you believe all the windows were up and none were broken, right?
That is correct.
Okay. You don't know that. You just told me that was an assumption,
Okay?
right?
Yes?
Okay, so the conclusion of time that you're giving to them is based upon some assumptions. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. I have nothing further.
Mr. Rubenstein?
Nothing based on that, Your Honor. If I can have just a moment to confer with this.
Yes, sir.
Judge, my next witness is probably more than the
Oh.
15 minutes or so. It might be good time to do the mid-afternoon break.
Mr. Folker's subpoena, is he released?
He
or
is under subpoena. He can be released as far as the people are concerned.
No objection.
You're released from your subpoena and free to go.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you. We'll go ahead and take our afternoon recess, ladies and gentlemen. Please remember all those instructions for the recesses. And we'll see you back in about 10 minutes, please. Please rise for our jury. Our jury's left the court. Anything else for the record, Mr. Colvin?
No, sir.
Mr. Rubenstein? All right, thank you. I'll see you back at 5 after 3, please. Thank you.
Ms. Olson.